Yeah, hi guys, good morning. And in today's session, we'll work on auto scaling groups. Okay, so this is very important concept of AWS. Okay, so guys, someone go on mute. Raja. Okay, so we'll try to see how auto scaling works. What are the different type of scalings available? What are the different type of templates available? Okay, and apart from that we'll see how it will help us our environment to make sure the applications, I mean there is no such kind of downtime, or the performance of our applications are pretty good. Okay, so let me share my screen. Hope you guys can see my screen. Yes, right. So for example, assume that we have our application. Okay, this is our EC2. Okay, and we have deployed Apache, and here we have our index.html. Okay, so to this particular application, so the capacity of this application is t2.micro. For example, assume that we got a requirement that 100 users will be accessing our application. Okay, so what we have did, we have spin up one up t2.micro, we have configured Apache, and we have configured our index.html file. So the expected traffic was of 100 users. Okay, for example, if all the sudden the users has become from 100 to 1000, okay, mean more traffic is been receiving to our application. So our website got popular, or for some reasons we are seeing there is a very huge traffic. So in this case, what will happen? T2.micro was basically, it was used to support for 100 users. So now in our case, we have got 100 users. What will happen? The performance of our website will be very slow. Okay, apart from that, there is also a chance that our server will also be a downtime, means it will not able to respond because the server has got lot of requests and our T2.micro is unable to handle. In such kind of case, what we need to do? Either we need to manually upgrade this system, okay, from t2.micro to t2.large, or I need to add one more system to our environment. Okay, so in such kind of cases we cannot manually make the changes because it will be very difficult for us to manage. So what we do, we have one concept called auto scaling group, okay, which will help us to scale up and scale down instances based upon certain metrics. Means it will automatically add one new instance if the number of users or requests are high, and if the CPU utilization is more than 70%, then it will add one more instance to our environment. For example, t2.micro, then it will add automatically one more t2.micro. Okay, t2.micro, and it will also have Apache and then index.html. Okay, so in such kind of cases, we use auto scaling to scale up the instances without any manual intervention based upon the number of requests at the load balancer, or based upon the CPU utilization. This will automatically create one new instance. For example, assume that from 1000 again the traffic is normal to 100. So in such case, what it will do, it will delete our EC2 instance because this is not required. For 100 users, this t2.micro is okay, right? So this will automatically scale up and scale down the instances based upon the behavior. Okay, now in auto scaling we have two different type of auto scaling options. Sorry guys. So in scaling we have two different type of scalings. One is vertical scaling and one is horizontal scaling. So what do you mean by vertical scaling? For example, vertical scaling means this is our existing instance. So in vertical scaling, what we generally do is we'll replace t2.micro to some other instance. Means we are trying to add some more capacity. Okay, t2.micro, and then we are replacing it with t2.medium. means vertical scaling is something where we add more power to our existing instances. If our current if our current EC2 is T2.micro, then we'll expand the instance type. Okay, we'll change the instance type to T2.pdm. So this kind of scaling we call as vertical scaling. Okay, and then we have horizontal scaling. Add more instances to the environment means, for example, we have one EC2, then we are going to add one more EC2 to our environment. Okay, we are going to add one more EC2 to our environment. So this is horizontal scaling. In vertical scaling, to the same instance, we are changing the instance type, means we are adding more power, like we are adding extra RAM or hard disk space and other stuff. For example, to your laptops, what we do, if suppose we are saying we are facing any kind of slowness in our laptops, right? Generally what we do, we try to add some extra RAM or SSD hard disk to our laptops to make it more powerful, right? So such kind of case we call as vertical scaling. Horizontal scaling means adding new instances to the environment. Okay, now again, in which use case or which scenarios will be using vertical scaling and which use case we will be using horizontal scaling? For example, if suppose assume that in this EC2 machine we are using a enterprise edition. Basically for enterprise edition, what is required? License key is required. For example, this is RDS. Okay, for example, assume that this is RDS instance. So spinning up a new RDS instance is something which is not required for us. Means if suppose I'm trying to create one new RDS instance, then again there will be a problem with the data as well. How are we going to synchronize the database? RDS is nothing but one database service in AWS. Okay, so if suppose I'm trying to create or I'm trying to create one more EC2 with the same RDS instance, what will happen? We will not be able to synchronize the data. Means here we can find some other data and the newly created instance might have some other data. So in RDS cases, we generally go for horizontal scaling, sorry, vertical scaling, because I don't want to create one more RDS, but I will just expand the size of my existing RDS. Okay, that's one case. Apart from that, if suppose we have any license versions, okay, for example, in this machine we have Splunk. Okay, Splunk we need to purchase license. Okay, so what will happen if suppose I'm trying to create one more instance, or if I'm trying to use horizontal scaling, what will happen? One new instance will get created. Again, I need to pay the payment for license. Okay, for example, one more instance, and again I need to pay for license. Okay, so every time whenever we are trying to spin up, we are also purchasing the license as well. So this is also not relevant. Basically we are wasting our money. So if suppose we are using any enterprise editions, in that case we use vertical scaling. Means only one instance we are changing the size of this instance. If it is an open source application or open source web servers or application servers, in that case we can use horizontal scaling, because we are not going to pay anything, right? So even if you are purchasing, if you are spinning up 10 instances, then we are not going to pay anything for license, right? So that's two different use cases where we will be using vertical scalings and horizontal scalings. Hope this was clear.
Bro, Splunk contained.
Splunk is a log management tool. The,
Sorry.
Splunk is a log management tool. This will help us to keep a copy of our logs. I mean, if suppose you are using Tomcat or your EC2 logs, right? So any logs, local machine of Petakuta, what we'll do, we'll move this to the Splunk centralized server. Log management tool, basically. Okay.
Okay.
So now, so why auto scalings are really required? For example, what we have seen recently. Okay. So we have seen IPL in Geo Cinema, right? Jio Cinema, IPL live streaming. Okay, if you see this live streaming, there will be around 1 crore users who are accessing our application, right? So in order to support these many users, at Geo end, I mean the Geo support team or the operations team, what they will do, they will not try to launch new server whenever they are seeing a lot of traffic. Okay, they configure some auto scaling to their application, which will automatically scale up and make sure that everyone is able to access their application, which is working smooth, and there is no such kind of downtime or impact on their business, right? After IPL, currently, if you go to Geo, right, so the number of users will be, okay, users will be very low, because it is not something what regularly we will be watching Geo Cinema, right? So the number of users will be very low. In such case, so what they will do, they will again not delete all the instances what has been created. That needs to be automatically scale up and scale down. Okay. So in such kind of cases, we configure auto scalings. With the help of auto scaling, we are also making sure that our application is highly available. Okay. Guys, hope this was clear.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Backend లో ఆటోమేటిక్ డిలీట్ అవ్వదా బ్రో?
ఏంది
ఇన్స్టెన్స్
delete ఎప్పుడు అవుతుంది ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ okay what we have configured for 1 crore users we have configured 100 servers for example. Okay, so for 10,000 users it should only maintain 10 servers. So what will happen, based upon the traffic, users ఎంత మంది ఉన్నారో, ఎన్ని రిక్వెస్ట్ వస్తున్నాయో మా సర్వర్ కి, based upon that it will automatically అదే స్కేల్ అప్ చేసుకుంటది, అదే స్కేల్ డౌన్ కూడా చేసుకుంటది. మనం డిలీట్ చేయాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు, అదే డిలీట్ చేసేస్తుంది. Okay,
ఓకే ఓకే బ్రో.
now yeah, anything else? So now if suppose basically in order to configure this auto scaling, AWS should understand from where this application needs to be executed. Means ఏది తీసుకొని one server should be launched, out of which image, in which VPC, in which key pair, security group, subnet. So from where it needs to pick all these things. So for that configurations, I mean that basically if you want to use auto scaling, we need to configure one template from where all the configurations needs to be picked up. Okay, how AWS will understand what needs to be spun up. For example, okay, the amount of traffic is high, then it needs to launch one new server. From where AWS will understand, how AWS will understand. So that's where we have launch configuration and launch template in AWS. We can either use launch configuration or we can use launch template for these configurations. Okay, in this case, okay, so we'll talk about this after some time, so let us now discuss this. Okay, so we have two configurations, one is launch configuration and one is launch template. So we can either use launch config or launch template. So what is recommended by AWS is launch template is recommended by AWS. Launch configuration is not recommended by AWS. Basically, why? Both are almost similar. There are no changes in both these templates, but launch template is something we can have multiple versions of our template. Means, for example, one template you are trying to configure t2.micro. In second template, what we'll do? We'll try to configure t2.medium. I mean, we can have multiple versions of same template file with some minor changes. Or if you want to edit this template, we can edit this template as well. If you want to pass some parameters as well, then we can pass some parameters to this template as well. Okay. Whereas launch configurations, this is something which is not editable. Means once it is created, this cannot be edited. If you want to create one new launch configuration, then again we need to write from scratch. Okay, so this is not recommended. by AWS, and auto scaling groups are very important concept, and this is most frequently asked in interviews as well. Even they will ask what is the difference between launch configuration and launch templates. Okay, now we need to create one launch configuration, okay, or launch template. So we'll try to create launch template first, and then we'll configure auto scaling group, and then we'll try to work on launch configuration. Okay, so let me go to my AWS. Guys, if you have any questions, then let me know. Okay, this is my AWS account. Okay, in North Virginia only. Okay, so if I'll go to EC2, on left side we can find the launch template configurations. Okay, this option is something for launch configurations. For example, if I'm clicking on launch template, these configurations are almost same how we are trying to launch our EC2. Okay, so let us see this. Let me create one launch template. If I click this, okay, here we can see one template. Okay, okay, and then let me click on create launch template. Okay, this will be test launch template will be the name. Okay, which version of template we are trying to create. Okay, for example, v1. Okay, version 1. And then if I scroll down, then here it is asking what image should it use. Okay, so if I'll go to browse AMIs, okay, and I want to use Amazon Linux 2 AMI. Okay, if I'll click select, okay, AMI is being configured, and then instance type. What should be the instance type? Okay, so if I'll select t2.micro, okay, we are creating a launch template with all these configurations. So this requirement should be used to spin up one instance. Okay, and then what should be the key pair to the newly launched instances? If I'll click here, so we'll go for Linux commands. Okay, this will be my key pair. Okay, and networking settings. What should be the networking part? Which VPC this should use? Okay, sorry, this is for subnet. So what I will do is I will not specify the subnet details now, because I will configure this while creating my auto scaling. Okay, so I will ignore this now. So no subnet. So security group, select existing one. I will use the default security group. Okay, EBS volumes are same. Okay, and then in advanced details, if I scroll down, I will write one basic script which will help me to launch one Apache and configure one index.html. Means if suppose we are launching 5 instances, then in all these 5 instances we should have our application. Okay, for example, assume that in here we have our index.html. Okay, and I have configured my auto scaling now. In auto scaling, I don't have any index.html. So what will happen? It will create one EC2. That will be one empty EC2. Okay, when the user is trying to hit this application EC2, basically based upon the load balancer configuration or XYZ configuration. So what will happen? This user will not be able to access our application because there is no application. Okay, that's the reason. What I'm trying to do is either I will use user data and configure one script which will deploy my application, or else while taking the AMI, I will launch one AMI. I mean, I will launch one EC2. I will do all the configuration, for example, my application deployment and everything, and I will take one snapshot. I will create one image again, And at this point, what I will do, I will browse AMIs, I will go to my AMIs and select my AMI. Basically, my AMI will have my application, right? So that's how we can make the changes. Okay. So what happened? Backspace. Okay, let me try to create again. Test launch template, and then AMI. I want to use Amazon Linux. Instance type T2 micro. Basically, if you'll see, don't include it launch template. So what we can do, we can pass this as parameters. So that's where we have written this point. We can pass some parameters. Basically, if you don't want to include now, then we can pass these parameters at the runtime. Okay. So for now, I'm trying to configure this. Subnet, no, not required. Okay, I don't want to add subnet because I want to show how can we pass parameters as well. Okay. And then advanced details. We'll try to create one script, bin.bash -1 install httpd. Okay, and then we have touch var www.html.index.html. Okay, and then echo so welcome to ASG. Okay, this is my file, and then this file should be copied in html dot this.html. Okay, and then I will use systemctl enable http. Why I'm using enable? Basically, whenever my system or my machine gets started, right? So this will make sure that to start my service automatically. Okay, systemctl start http. Okay, now I think we have did all the configurations. Okay, don't think so we have any errors here. Okay, now let me click on create launch template. Okay, so what we have did, we have created one launch template now. So now let us go to auto scaling groups. Okay, if I'll click here and then if I'll scroll down here, we can find auto scaling groups. Here we can find one more configuration called launch configurations. Okay, we haven't configured it yet. So let me go to auto scaling groups, create auto scaling group, and then the name. Name, what I will do, I will use launch template. Okay, and then here I can select which launch template, test iPhone launch template. So this is what I have created, and this is the version 1 which is default and which is available. Okay, and then if I'll, these are the different options what we have configured to our launch template, and if I'll click on next. Okay, here it is asking our VPC, which VPC this should get created. Okay, this is going to be default, and in which availability zone this should get created. Okay, I will select 3 availability zones. Basically, out of these 3 availability zones, whenever it is trying to create new instances, this can create anywhere in any of the subnets. Okay, here we can configure the overridables. Means basically if you want to pass any parameters or if you want to edit the existing template or override any configuration, then we can select this override template. Okay, and here we can select how many instances, how many cores, and if you want to add what are the different features, we can select here. Okay, or else if you want to manually add, select which instance. For example, what we have selected over here, T2 micro. Now I want to pass T2 medium. So this is how I can change. Okay, so I will use the basic default one, whatever we have configured, and let me click on next. Security group belong to two different. Okay, security group what we have is for the test VPC. Okay, let me use test VPC. Okay, so next. Now here we can configure this either to the load balancer. If suppose if we have load balancer, then we can attach this to our existing load balancer as well. So what will happen? Generally, our applications will be mapped to load balancer only, and load balancer will redirect the traffic to the instances based upon path prefix, based upon rule, based upon health check, right? So below load balancer, okay, this will be our load balancer. Okay, here what will happen? It will create multiple EC2 instances. Okay, here we will have multiple EC2 instances because of auto scaling group. So we are not worried about the IP address because user is trying to access our load balancer DNS, not the IP of the EC2, right? So basically this will be the private EC2 instances. So we are not exposing this directly. We'll configure this to the target group for load balancer, and load balancer will accept the user request and send out the data. Okay, here if you have only two instances as well, then the behavior will be same. If you have only one, then the behavior will be same. So we are not worried how many instances are being launched. Okay, and in order to expose this, it is not required, so we are exposing the load balancer only. Okay, now in our case, I don't have any load balancer for now, so I will use no load balancer. So keep this as, I mean, this is optional, so this is not required. So health checks. So this is period for the health check. So for how much seconds this should be checked. If you want to configure any monitoring, then we can configure the monitoring. Instance warm up, basically based upon this, it will see how many seconds this will take to launch one instance. Okay. So I will not keep anything right now. So let me click on next. And this is very important. Group size. Okay, here we have three different types in auto scaling groups: minimum, desired, and maximum. For example, at least one should be the minimum requirement. Means minimum means how many instances you want to be available. At least one, because if suppose I have configured this as 0, and if someone has deleted it manually, what will happen? Auto scaling will ignore because the minimum requirement was 0 and the equation is matching. Okay, so in our case or in any case, always make sure that at least you are keeping the minimum value as 1. At least one instance should be available, then only auto scaling will trigger. Or else it will, what it will do, for example, assume that we have one instance here. Okay, so my minimum value is 1. So if suppose this instance has deleted, for some reasons this has been deleted, so what will happen? Auto scaling will check for this requirement. Okay, minimum was 1, now this is 0, so what it needs to do? It needs to create one instance. Okay, if minimum is 0, if this has been deleted, what will happen? Auto scaling will check, okay, minimum was 0 and current environment there are no instances, means the equation is valid, it is matching. So it will not trigger the launch template, it will ignore this because everything is as expected only. Okay, so always make sure to have the minimum size as 1. So desired state can be anything. So basically what I am trying to do is, I want, this is my wish, how many instances I want to be available. Okay, and maximum 5 means if we are seeing any kind of changes in the CPU utilization or the request at the load balancer level, then maximum number of instances can be 5, means 5 instances can be launched. Okay, this is my desired capacity. So always make sure that desired capacity is higher than or greater than minimum. If minimum is 1, then desired should be more than 1. If minimum is 2, then desired cannot be 1. This is not valid. Then desired can be 3 or 4 or 5. And maximum, how many instances you want to launch. Either it is 5, 10, 20, that's up to you. Okay. So in my case, what I will do, I will use minimum as 1, desired as 2, and maximum as 5. Okay. So desired 2, minimum 1, and maximum 5. Okay, and here we have different type of scaling policies. Okay, so for example, target tracking scaling policy. Here we I mean, as I have said, right, here if you see, is used to scale up and scale down instances based on certain metrics. So this is where we can find the metrics. Okay. So if suppose we have four different metrics available: CPU utilization, network input, network out, and application load balancer, request count per target. How many requests we are able to see at the load balancer level. So for now, what I will do, I will use the average CPU utilization. If CPU utilization is more than 50, take 100 seconds to launch one new instance, means wait for 100 seconds. If for 100 seconds the CPU utilization is more than 50, then trigger auto scaling group, launch new instances. Okay, and then let me click on next. Next, I will not configure any monitoring or anything. I don't want any notifications because already we have did notifications, right? So if you want, you can configure the notifications part. Okay, I will ignore this. I don't want any tags. And then review, let me check each and everything and click on create auto scaling group. So if I'll do this, and if I'll duplicate my page, and if I'll go to EC2, here we can see two instances are been provisioning. Why? Because the moment I have launched my auto scaling, what it has did, it has AWS has checked, okay, if we have any instances or not. No, and it has launched two instances. Why? Because my desired state was two. I was wanting to have two instances. Okay, so based upon this, two instances has launched. And here, if you'll go to your auto scaling group, if you go to your auto scaling group and if you click on launch template, in activity we can check the logs, what's happening. See, two instances has been successfully launched on 2023 May. If suppose something has failed, we can see here. Okay, so now or yeah, there is no public IP. Basically, for this VPC, I mean, there was public IP was disabled by default. So I haven't checked that. So that's the reason public IP is not enabled. So what will happen? So if we have the public IP and if I'll copy the public IP and try to access on browser, what will happen? We can see our index.html page in both these servers. Okay, as of now, this is not possible for me to check. We'll try to show when I'm trying to configure launch configurations. Okay, so now if suppose assume that I have logged into my console and I have deleted one instance, terminate. Okay, if you'll see this activity, auto scaling activities as well. Okay, so here what's happening? I have shut down one instance and auto scaling is not getting triggered. Why? Because my requirement was minimum desired was 2, it has launched 2. I have deleted one manually and it is trying to maintain this minimum value. Okay, for example, if I have deleted this as well, I mean for any reason this has been deleted, so what will happen? Let us see. Now we don't have any instance. Okay, see, the moment it has been deleted, this is trying to launch one instance pending. If I'll go to auto scaling configurations, refresh this, pre in service, it is trying to launch one new instance because it has checked that minimum value was 1 and it is trying to launch one instance. Okay, so this is how the instances will be launched automatically without any manual intervention, and it will try to maintain the minimum value for now. Okay, so whenever you have configured auto scaling groups, even if you try to delete this will get deleted and again it will start a new instance. So always make sure to delete your auto scaling group only. I mean, after practice, try to delete your auto scaling. Okay, understood? Now, as we have seen the metric, right, CPU utilization is more than 50, then it should scale up. I will not be able to do that because there is no public IP and I will not be able to log in. So we'll test this in launch configuration. Okay, here, let me show you one more thing. If I'll go to launch template, okay, so I can use this template. I can edit this. Okay, I can modify the template and I can create a new version. Okay, if I'll click here, okay, here it is asking what needs to be done. Okay, so what I will do, instead of T2 micro, this time I will use a configuration as T2.small and create template version. So what I have did, I have created a new version of template, means I have just modified my existing template. So once that is done, what I will do, I will come to my launch configuration. Okay, launch template. Sorry, this is my auto scaling, right? So I will edit this auto scaling. Sorry, I will edit this template part. Okay, and I will select the second version. This is the latest one. Okay, latest and update. So what will happen? Now we can see one new instance will get launched. If I'll go to my EC2, here we can see one new instance will get launched with T2 small configurations. Okay. So once these are deleted, let me terminate this. Okay, and if I check the activity, here we can see that it will be in service request. Basically, now this should spin up one T2 dot small instance. Same configuration. I have just updated my template. It is taking some time for this to launch. Guys, do you have any questions on this? Okay, in progress. Here we can see, if I'll refresh this page, now we can see something is pending. The size is T2 dot small now. Okay, that's how we can configure or change our launch templates. Okay. Now let me delete my auto scaling so that I don't want unnecessary builds. So let me delete this. Hope this was clear. Once deleted, now you can try to terminate and this will get terminated. Okay. Guys, any questions? Yes or no?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. Now
Okay. So,
we'll, yeah, now we'll try to do the same thing, but in terms of launch configurations. Okay. So here we have launch configurations. So if I click this launch configuration, create launch configuration. Okay. Name, test launch configuration. Here also we can use the same thing. Okay, same configurations. Here it is asking if you have any kind of my AMIs. I mean the default AMIs. Okay, so I don't have any AMI. So what I will do, we'll try to take one AMI ID and search for that AMI. Okay, so this is the AMI ID. Let me copy, search for this. Okay, this AMI ID, and the instance type will be T2 medium, T2 small, T2 dot micro. Let me use micro. Choose. Okay, if you have any IAM role monitoring, we can configure this. Okay, and then to select existing security group, I want to use default one. This is for default VPC. Okay. VPC, here we have two different VPCs. Okay. Okay, so let me use the default VPC and then select existing key pair. acknowledge, create launch configuration. Okay, so we have created our launch configuration, and this configuration will be used to spin up our instances. Okay, now let me again go to my auto scaling, create auto scaling group, name test launch config, and then here let me switch to launch configuration and select the launch configuration what we have created. Okay, click on next, and here it will be asking which VPC and which availability zone this should provision. Next. Okay, same configuration. See, there is no change in these configurations. Okay, no load balancer, and then next, minimum desired is 1, sorry, desired is 2, minimum is 1, maximum is 5, what I want. Target routing policies, if CPU utilization is more than 100, then only this should get triggered, and the grace period or warm-up period will be 100 seconds. Next, 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 and then create auto scaling group. One or more security groups are not linked to the VPC configured in the auto scaling group. The security group problem. Okay. So maybe the security group belongs to some other VPC. That's the reason I'm seeing this issue. So let me use test VPC. But what's happening is whenever I'm trying to create this in my test VPC, right? So basically, I am unable to get the public IP. So let me do one thing. Let me change the region only. Let me use Oregon region. I don't think so. I have multiple VPCs here. Oregon region. Okay. So in Oregon, let me create one launch configuration again. Create launch configuration. Oregon LC. Okay. Let me copy the AMI ID. Here we have Linux 2. This is my AMI ID. I want to copy this. Okay. AMI ID instance type. I want to use T2 micro. T2.micro. And then existing security group. Let me use default. Oh shit, here also I have multiple VPCs. Okay, let me check which VPC is available and which is not available. Which is the default VPC? 1E4 is the default. Okay, so let me use 1E4. Okay, so let me use this because I'm using default security group and I will use default VPC. Okay, so key pair, let me use test Oregon and acknowledge, create launch configurations. Okay, so we have created our launch configuration. Now it's time for us to create auto scaling groups. Create auto scaling group, Oregon ASG, then switch to launch configuration, select your launch configuration, click next. VPC should be default because my security group was also from default region, default VPC. Okay, so let me select two regions, two subnets. Next, we don't have any load balancers. This will be the basic, I mean the default settings. I will not be changing this. In your case, I want you guys to attach this to load balancer. Okay, so next, desired 2, minimum 1, maximum 5. CPU utilization more than 50. It should scale up 100, and then next. Create auto scaling group. Okay, now if I'll go to my EC2, here we can see 2 instances has been provisioned. Okay, 2 instances are been getting provisioned, and if I'll go to the auto scaling group and if you'll check the activity from here, we can find the logs, what's happening with our auto scaling group. Okay, So here for launch configuration, we cannot edit this. If you want to change the configuration, then again I need to create one new from scratch. Okay, that's the difference between launch config and launch template. Okay, so now we have our EC2 instance which is running. So let me try to connect, because condition what I have given, if the CPU utilization is more than 50% for 100 seconds, one new instance should launch. Okay, let us try to test that out. Failed to connect to your EC2 instance, is unable to connect. What happened? We are seeing issues because we have created lot of VPCs, right? So whether we have the internet gateway configurations to default VPC or not, I need to check that again. Okay, this is not launching, so let me do one thing. Let me go to my VPC and let me check the connectivities. Okay, so whenever you are trying to launch auto scaling, right, so use any one region where you haven't created any VPC. Mean work on default VPCs only. Okay, this is my default VPC 1E4. Let me check subnets. 1E4 we have. Okay, if we have internet gateway, yes, we have internet gateway attached to 1E4 and routing tables. Okay, we have subnet. We have public route table where we have 4 different subnets associated. In routings as well, we have internet gateway configuration. Yeah, I think this configuration is okay. Not sure what happened. Let me check. System check whether it is successful or not. VPC configuration is okay, but still I am unable to launch them or connect to this instance. Security group, let me check security group rules. Here we don't have this. Okay, let me add all traffic and from anywhere. Okay, maybe because of that I was unable to connect to SSH. Okay, so now let me try to refresh this. Yeah, so that was the issue with security group. Okay, so now we have been able to log into our server, right? So what I will do, I will try to add some fake stress on my instance. As of now, the CPU utilization is 0.0%. So we have that command, right? Yesterday, what we have seen. Where is that? Where is that? Increase CPU load. And let me execute this command. This will add some fake load on our machine. Okay, meantime what I will do, I will also check the CloudWatch dashboard as well, CPU utilization. Okay, 225 is the IP, 225 is the IP monitoring. So let me check the CPU utilizations. I want this for customized one for every 1 minute. If I'll do top, what will happen? This is 100% now, and hopefully we can see one more instance is been again getting launched. Okay, so let me go to launch configurations or auto scaling. So basically, when number of users will get increased, what will happen? The CPU utilization will be very high. Okay, because we are getting lot of requests on the server, so CPU utilization will get high, and in such case, auto scaling will get triggered, and then we'll spin up our instances. So let us see if any new instance has been launched or not. Not yet, not yet. Okay, if I go to auto scaling groups and if I check this activity, still 2 servers only. Okay. Okay, 33% only. So our requirement was for 50%. Okay, let me add some more load. Execute this. Okay, we need to wait for a couple of minutes.
Anna,
Yeah,
what is comment for stress -C4?
sorry.
Stress -C4 command.
Basically, we have one function called stress in Linux commands. Okay, that will add some additional. I mean, if -C4 means 4 core of CPU's weight is being put on your instance, and our capacity is of 1 core of CPU. That's where it is getting high request on our machine. We are trying to add some random load on our instance.
Okay.
Okay,
We
-C
can
is version of cores. How many core of CPUs? చెప్పు బ్రో ఏమో చెప్తూ చెప్తూ ఆగినాం. We'll see if something happened. No, this is 99%. Top 100% is there. Here we are unable to get this. Still 33% only. No, no, 100 seconds. So basically, after 100 seconds, this should spin up. ఇక్కడ చూస్తే నా సర్వర్ కూడా ఆల్రెడీ స్లో అయిపోయింది బికాస్ ఆఫ్ లోడ్. ఐఎమ్ ట్రైంగ్ టు ప్రెస్ అప్ arrow but still it is not working. See, this is not responding because of the load what we have on our server. And stress commands and all are to add some random load basically that we do at part of load testing, and this is part of testing, guys. Okay, what they'll do is they'll just try to add some random load on our instance, and they'll try to see the behavior. If we are trying to add 4 core of CPUs of load on our application, so how application is responding, what kind of issues we are seeing. So that's all part of testing what they'll do. No instances is being spinned up. I'm trying to add a load continuously. Okay. I'm trying to put some load. Okay. It should trigger my auto scaling. Still no activities. No activity still. Basically, let me do one thing. Auto scaling. Okay, let me try to change my auto scaling from 50% to 10% of CPU or 2% of CPU only for testing, right? So let me do that. If I can do this. How many instances are there? Only two. Activity also same, still two. Target scalings. Desired code. I haven't changed desired as code. In activity, see here we can see now we are able to see some two new instances are been created because a monitor alarm target tracking Oregon ASG alarm high is triggered policy target policy changing the desired capacity from 2 to 4. Okay, what happened? Basically, because of the high load on the CPU, the alarm has been triggered, and we can see couple of different instances which are being provisioned automatically. If I go to my EC2, if I click on instance, see two instances are been provisioning. Okay, now what I will do is because of this instance that has been created, right? 225. 225. Where is my 225? This is my 225. Okay, now let me terminate this. So what will happen? The load will be normal, and then this will be again back to normal position only. Okay, so this is how auto scaling will automatically scale up and scale down based upon launch configuration and launch template, and based upon certain metrics this will work. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, then let me know, or else I think we are good with this topic for today. Okay, if you don't have anything, then
Who will decide how many CPUs are auto scale in future?
how will decide means basically you are also part of the DevOps team only. So there will be some capacity planning meetings where you will be involved. Based upon that, we'll take one decision what needs to be done, which instance needs to be used. It's not something always who will decide. There might be some time where you also
Okay.
need to be decide. Okay, so try to do some R&D on this. Try to check how can we use which instance type and what type of use case. Okay. There will be capacity planning meetings where it will be decided what type of instance needs to be used, and basically this is part of architecture itself. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So thank you so much, guys. Okay, let me stop